Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
It's Lindsay Smith-Rogers. Today, menopause, a universal life stage that has often been overlooked in healthcare despite its broad impacts on women's health. Stephanie Desmon talks to two Johns Hopkins primary care doctors, Tina Zhang and Wendy Bennett, about our evolving understanding of menopause care and hormone therapy, as well as emerging challenges from social media influencers and menowashing, where unproven products are marketed as treatments and can be misleading. Let's listen.
Wendy Bennett and Tina Zhang, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you.
Sometimes menopause is framed as this silent topic, but I got to tell you, in my circle of friends, it's all we talk about all the time. But when it comes to the healthcare system, research, public health, it's still surprisingly overlooked. Tina, why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephanie. I think menopause has been kind of overlooked in medical education and clinical care for the longest time. And there are a couple of reasons behind it, but I think one of the biggest drivers is because some research in the past made it seem like hormone therapy had more risks than benefits. A whole generation of women were recommended to not take hormone therapy. And as a result, they just thought maybe we should just not talk about it. And then as a result of that, our providers and doctors who are going through medical school, they didn't get a lot of education about it. So there just really was not much attention with regards to menopause, perimenopause, and this transition. I will say in the past couple years, like maybe within the past 3 to 5 years, there has been more interest in menopause. There's a lot more talk about it in social media, but that has been very, very recent that it's been this way.
What is menopause?
Women go through menopause average age around 51. And we characterize it as when a woman doesn't have a period for a total of 12 months. So it's 12 months, no period. And then we say she's gone through menopause. But the challenge is that menopausal symptoms start way earlier. So there's this perimenopausal period where women are starting to feel symptoms when their hormones are fluctuating years and years before they actually go through the menopause transition. And so it can go on for a long time. And that's why, we often think about in primary care, Tina and I are both primary care doctors, thinking about the life course, right? That a woman has all these different stages of her life, and menopausal symptoms begin well before, but we start to talk about them earlier. We start to provide some anticipatory guidance to patients about what they might be going through and what that looks like for them.
What are some of these symptoms, Wendy?
There's a lot of different symptoms. Many women experience sleep issues, so insomnia is very common. People can get hot flashes or hot flushes, and so that's where you suddenly get this sensation like you're sweating. It can happen at night and actually be disruptive for sleep and have people wake up at night sweating or bed sheets wet and need to change their clothes. It can cause some anxiety. Some people get heart palpitations, so it affects sort of all systems of the body. And that's why it's especially challenging to treat, is because we have to think about all the different things that are affected a woman's mental health, her social functioning, her physical functioning. All these different aspects of a woman's life can be affected by menopausal symptoms. And it's a normal transition. It's natural, right? Something that we also talk to people about, that this is just what everyone goes through.
I guess it must be tempting for a lot of symptoms to feel like they must be menopause if the woman is a certain age. Tina, is that something that you struggle with?
Absolutely. I think right now, because there is more attention finally on menopause, that now everything is being attributed to menopause. And I think as a good primary care doctor, both Wendy and I are very thoughtful and proactive about making sure there's nothing else that are causing the symptoms that women are experiencing. In addition to the symptoms that Wendy had mentioned, we sometimes also see issues with cognitive function. So memory changes, brain fog, see joint issues, issues. And that can sometimes be arthritis, but other times it can be related to the menopausal transition as well. It is really hard because hormone fluctuations can cause a lot of different symptoms. But I think it's important to do our due diligence and also make sure we're ruling out other potential conditions that may be contributing or the primary driver of certain symptoms.
I wanted to talk about treatment because you referenced it earlier, talking about hormone therapy. Can you tell us why there was hesitation, why there still might be hesitation, what the confusion can be attributed to, Tina?
Absolutely. There are a lot of potential reasons why there's some confusion around hormone therapy, but one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, is because of the Women's Health Initiative, also known as the WHI, and it's really impossible to talk about menopause and menopause hormone therapy without talking about that study. So very briefly, this was a study that was published in 2002 in JAMA that was looking at whether or not menopause hormone therapy prevented chronic diseases like heart disease, stroke, etc. So the question here was not whether or not, the question they were asking was not whether hormone therapy helped manage menopausal symptoms. It was for prevention of disease. And what they found based on that study, it was actually prematurely terminated because there was an increased risk of breast cancer, of stroke, of heart disease, etc. And so when those study results came out, there was a lot of media attention, and it led to a significant drop in how many providers felt comfortable prescribing hormone therapy. And it meant an entire generation of women who did not get hormone therapy because everyone was terrified to prescribe it because of the WHI. And now that there's been follow-up studies, additional analysis of the WHI, what we know now actually is that it's a lot more nuanced. The average age of women in the WHI was 63, which is 12 years older than the average age of menopause in the United States. And so the thought is that the benefits of hormone therapy actually start when you're younger, ideally less than 60 and within 10 years of menopause onset, and that the risks are actually higher as you get older. So if you're over 60 or more than 10 years of menopause onset, the risk may potentially outweigh benefits. So there's just nuances to hormone therapy in terms of when we prescribe it and at what time and the reason behind it. But that was one of the primary drivers of the controversy behind menopause hormone therapy. And now we have a lot more data that tells us and informs us that the doses play a role, the formulation of hormones and the type we prescribe, those impact your risk. And so something that's given as a patch or a transdermal gel has a different risk profile than a pill that's taken orally. So all of those nuances are really important to understand and consider when you're thinking about menopause hormone therapy. And that's why I think it's important as providers and as patients to know that there's so many different options out there, and it really needs to be individualized to each patient and their risk profile. That's why it's a little bit confusing because there's so many nuances to menopause hormone therapy. And it's why we're sometimes a bit concerned when there are these blanket statements coming out on social media or in the news. There's a lot more nuances to consider than what we sometimes hear.
I want to come right back to that, but I just wanted to say the FDA recently made a proclamation about these hormones. Isn't that right?
That's exactly right. The FDA recently removed the black box warning on estrogen-containing menopause hormone therapy. And I think on one hand, it is a move in the right direction because there are so many benefits of estrogen, and a lot of women can qualify for estrogen and do really well with it. On the other hand, it doesn't mean just because we remove the black box warning that there aren't still risks associated with being on estrogen. And so it's really important that we really sit down with each individual patient, understand their medical history, their family history, their symptoms, their concerns, and really individualize what type of hormone, what dose, what formulation to them. It is exciting in one sense in that we're moving in the right direction. There's more attention being applied to menopause and menopause hormone therapy, but I want to make sure the pendulum isn't swinging too much in the opposite direction. And now everyone gets hormone therapy when actually the risk may outweigh benefits in certain cases.
Wendy?
Yeah, I love that. And I love you providing that history, Tina. I also think it's really important. For a long time when we were concerned about prescribing hormones, many of us got very good at prescribing non-hormone therapies to support patients through menopause, especially for a lot of the sleep symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and even a little bit of the vasomotor or the hot flashes can sometimes be helped with some other medications. So even for patients that either don't want to take hormones or shouldn't be taking hormones, risk factors for taking hormones, we do have other therapies that are helpful for a lot of people. We will often recommend some basic lifestyle changes, right? Like wearing an open color shirt and wearing things that you can layer so you can take things off, or sleeping in cotton. And there's things that can often help some just coping through things where not everybody wants to or takes hormones or should be on hormones. And we do have other things we could prescribe.
Where are people getting help? Not just from their doctors, right?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Something that I think we need to study a little bit more, right? Because especially this is changing so quickly that yes, people are coming to their doctors and we want their doctors to be equipped to take care of them and to not have this be stigmatizing and have an open conversation. So I do think people are seeking help from their doctors, but then there's all these online sources that obviously people are talking to each other, and there's different telemedicine groups that have popped up where patients can get prescriptions for hormones outside of their normal medical care. Even some of the weight loss companies are now getting into the menopause business, which really it is a big business. In fact, people see it as sort of like the next big boom of healthcare is sort of moving into this population of women that are really interested in treating their menopause symptoms and are open about talking about it. And now, don't just want to go to their doctors for care, but are seeking like all different alternative medications. Some of them are really not effective, and some of them people shouldn't be on. Sometimes people are asking for a hormone they really shouldn't probably be taking that because it's unsafe for them. And so there's a lot of concerns about risks as this kind of exploding business happens.
I wanted to follow up with you about the business. I know that some people call it menowashing. So tell me, what is that and why should we be concerned?
Yeah, so menowashing is basically a marketing practice where certain companies are taking wellness products, supplements, and branding them or rebranding them as menopause-specific treatment for patients. It leads to women who are struggling to find a provider who is hearing their concerns and is willing to treat their menopause symptoms. So they're looking online for like, what can I take instead to help with my hot flashes? And they'll see a supplement that says this is for your hot flashes and it will really help with symptoms, but there's really no data to support the efficacy of it. So the term menowashing really refers to when they use the idea of menopause to market some of these products.
Yeah, and it's a problem.
It is a problem. I think, again, going back to Wendy's point, menopause has also turned into a global industry and it's become a big boom. It's our new pink tax, is now the focus is on menopause. And so on one hand, I do think this is a sign that we're moving towards more interest in the menopausal transition. My hope is that this leads to more providers wanting to get more education about menopause, more patients feeling confident and feeling like they know where to go and where to find the information that they want to learn about menopause. But I am a bit concerned that it does mean now there's all these additional products that are entering the market that can be a bit confusing for patients as to whether or not they're helpful.
Potentially harmful.
And potentially harmful. That's exactly right.
I think we're a lot more concerned now about when patients are getting their hormones compounded by compounding pharmacies, because we often don't know what is going in that mix. And there's increasing concerns about compounded hormones as well, as opposed to buying getting the FDA approved prescription medications.
That's what you're mostly going to get from these social media sites, right?
Not necessarily. So some of them can prescribe the approved medications as well. So you'll probably see a mix depending on what company is doing it.
Menopause, as you know, is often seen as an individual experience, right? But Wendy, how is it also a public health issue?
The way I think of it as a public health issue is, and this kind of circles back to a little bit of the way Tina started us off, is really thinking about our systems, right? So we have like our clinical care systems and how we structure those and how they serve women as really a population, how they serve women getting older, how they serve women through a healthy aging process. And we know that now that many women have sought care from their obstetricians, gynecologists for their early reproductive years, but they might not have an ongoing internal medicine doctor, a primary care doctor that they're seeing through the aging phases, where we're starting to think about heart disease prevention. We're thinking about menopausal symptoms. We're thinking about all these life course changes. So setting up our system where really primary care is a service that we all have access to and is available, and where women are able to talk with their long-term doctors about what's going on with their bodies and how they can get those treated. So that's the healthcare system. We want to be able to educate our doctors. So as Tina mentioned, that for a long time we were concerned that medical students, residents were not getting adequate education around menopause care and the transition. And we're hoping, especially with Tina's amazing programming, that this is changing and that residents are really getting the education they need to provide high quality care to women. And then the other piece of this is really the social environment and the work environment that we're all in. Workplaces probably do not have any policies around supporting women going through menopause, what that looks like for them. Women who wear uniforms to work might need some adaptations of what those uniforms look like. We know that temperature settings in office buildings are set by men's temperature needs and not by women's needs. And of course, women's temperature needs are probably changing as they go through menopausal transitions. Well-being measures and how we support women so that they're not absent from work when they had a rough night sleeping, and allowing flexible schedules and providing that social support for all women are going through when they're going through menopause transitions, I think are really important.
Tina, the last word.
I really do strongly believe that menopause is a very important public health topic for all the reasons Wendy mentioned. It's a universal experience for women who have female reproductive organs. They're all going to go through it. And we know menopause impacts the risk of developing chronic diseases. We know there's an equity gap. We know there's a medical education gap. And I think there's so much potential in improving care for patients, in education for providers, and just helping women as they go through this natural aging process.
Wendy Bennett, Tina Zhang, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you
so much.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, Stephanie Desmon, and Rachel Walsh. Audio production by Michael Bonfils, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from J.B. Arbogast, Spencer Greer, and Chip Hickey. Distribution and social media by Rachel Walsh, with support from Nick Moran and Brianna Iacovelli. Follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Public Health Pod for more public health takes and special content. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.